Welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Ken.
And I'm Bethany.
And we're just a couple of world-class weirdos in love that love World of Warcraft.
We are that.
So this got 6th place in our Winter Request Fest.
Yay.
This is everything you need to know about dragons in Warcraft. And with Dragonflight, happening right now, feels like a good time to, learn more about dragons.
Yeah. I mean, is it ever a bad time to learn about dragons?
No, it's never a bad time to learn about dragons. And so if you want all of our World of Warcraft reactions, go ahead and check out the description of this video. We got playlists there for you. We checked out a bunch about World of Warcraft and went through the different expansions and the cutscenes and everything like that. So yeah, happy binging.
Yeah, and our journey is continuing, so you can expect a lot more to come in the future.
Exactly.
Dragons. You can't get more fantasy than dragons. And sometimes Warcraft is a fantasy universe. Dragons are some of the most powerful beings on Azeroth who have an extremely in-depth lore that begins all the way back to the very foundation of the world. How did these magnificent beasts come to be? What is their purpose? And what exactly are they doing in the modern day? Sit back and let's learn everything you need to know about dragons.
Yeah.
Our story begins during the Ordering of Azeroth. The Titan Keepers waged war with the untamed elements on the planet and banished them to their respective elemental planes. But not all of the elements were imprisoned. Some of these rogue elements developed into the first ever proto-dragons. The majority of the information we know about these ancient times comes from the novel Dawn of the Aspects, and in this book, there is easily one of the most horrifying and monstrous villains that has never really gotten the respect he deserves in-game.
Ooh, big ass dragon.
Whoa.
Galakron, the father of dragons, was a monolithic beast that dwarfed the rest of his kind. One day, an unquenchable hunger dominated his body, and he suddenly began to terrorize the other dragons. He performed the unthinkable and started to cannibalize the other proto-dragons. This had dramatic effects on his body, and he began to develop mutations like growing limbs and eyes all over his now decaying body. To put in perspective how big Galakron was, his roar had the ability to cause devastating avalanches, and his wings were so large that the other dragons would mistake it for thunder. His breath also had the ability to raise slain proto-dragons into undeath, which were called the Not Living, and their bite would infect other dragons who develop similar unrelenting taste for dragon flesh, and yet, they're literally zombie dragons.
Yeah.
The Titan Keepers and their surviving proto-dragons teamed up to defeat this gargantuan beast. These heroes included the Titan Keeper Tyr, Malygos, Nozdormu, Neltharion, Ysera, and Alexstrasza.
I recognize Ysera. No, Strauss.
During one of the battles, Tyr's hand was bitten clean off by Galakron. The Titan
Norse mythology
Keeper would later get a new silver hand as a replacement. This glorious, heroic battle would become legend for the people of Azeroth, and Tyr's silver hand became the symbol for the Knights of the Silver Hand Paladins thousands and thousands and thousands of years later. Galakron would later be defeated by the team of proto-dragons when Malygos flew inside of Galakron's mouth with a giant boulder and freezed it in his throat. Then Neltharion flew inside his mouth and blasted a zombie dragon down his throat to push the boulder in further. Because Galakron has little tiny proto-dragon arms, they were just too small to perform CPR on himself, and he choked to death and died. Yeah, kind of a crazy and strange death for the biggest dragon in Warcraft history.
Yeah.
Wouldn't expect it.
The final resting place for the Father of Dragons can still be found in the frozen tundra of Dragonblight. But the funny thing is, Galakron has a bunch of more screen time in Hearthstone compared to World of Warcraft, but maybe we'll see that change in a future expansion. After displaying their awesome power, the Titan Keepers were impressed by the 5 proto-dragons that defeated Galakrond. The raw power of the Titans was infused into these 5 proto-dragons so that they could become the Power Ranger defenders of Azeroth and protect the planet from any future threats. All of the Keepers agreed to strengthen these proto-dragons, except for Odin, because he's kind of an asshole.
Always is.
But they did it anyways. Ionar, the Titan of Life, empowered Alexstrasza and Ysera to protect all living creatures. Norgannon, the Titan of Magic, empowered Malygos to protect the powerful arcane that dwelled across Azeroth. Amenthul, High Father of the Pantheon, empowered Nozdormu to guard the very fabric of time and space. And finally, Khazgaroth, the Titan Shaper of Worlds, gave Neltharion the power over the earth and whatever dwelled beneath.
Neltharion, that's one turns
With their
right?
powers combined, this council of beings called the Aspects became the first ever fully fledged dragons to ever grace Azeroth, and now it's their mission to be the world's eternal defenders. When the Aspects were granted this power, in the sky there was a rare celestial event called the Embrace, where Azeroth's 2 moons embraced one another. The only time a dragon can be transformed into an aspect is during this event, which only happens every 430 years. Next, the Keepers helped forge the dragons a sanctuary called Wimrest Temple. This giant tower would serve as a meeting place for all of the dragonflights and be the heart of dragon culture. One of the many parts of dragon culture is something called a Visage Day.
Little baby dragon.
Visage Day is when a dragon comes to age and they perform a ceremony atop the Wimrest Temple to choose their humanoid form. Dragons have the ability to transform into any of the races on Azeroth, and it's typically done so that they can spy on the mortal races across the planet to make sure they aren't doing anything nefarious. Or
Which
they
they always
just do
are.
it for practical reasons. And these dragons knew how to transform into these races before they even existed because, bronze dragon flight and timey-wimey time travel stuff, okay? But here's the thing. Dragons are not just limited to humanoid forms. They can turn into anything. And I mean anything. There's this one part in the Dawn of the Aspects book where Alexstrasza just disguises herself as a giant-ass tree. Okay, now let's go through each of these dragonflights in more detail and talk about exactly what they do. Starting with the red dragonflight and the tree-transforming queen of dragons herself, Alexstrasza.
And the cycle of life is reborn anew.
The red dragonflight are the protectors of all life on Azeroth. This means that they're the ones to deal with any dangerous, overwhelming threats on the planet. They also restore devastated lands and protect ancient artifacts. One of the special abilities they have is that their fiery breath can either bring horrible destruction or rejuvenating life. We can see the healing effects of the fire firsthand during the Wrathgate cinematic, where they scorched the Alliance commander, Bolvar Fordragon, with their healing flames. I mean, doesn't Bolvar look healed? Just ignore the horrific charring all over his body that seared his flesh beyond recognition.
And he becomes a Lich King.
Look, he's healed, okay? Trust me. To this day, the Red Dragonflight and their Dragon Queen continue to watch over all life on Azeroth and protect it from certain death.
Before battle, I always assure my forces that through the fire and the flames, we'll carry on.
Time may pass, but the dream is eternal.
The other dragons of life are called the Green Dragonflight, who you don't see very often when exploring Azeroth. That's because this dragonflight mainly resides within the ethereal plane known as the Emerald Dream. This plane of existence is one of flourishing life that represents the world of Azeroth if it was never altered by intelligent beings. One of the special abilities green dragons have is they got that melatonin dragon breath that has the ability to put their enemies to sleep. Green dragons try to avoid combat to the best of their ability and pacify their enemies rather than kill them. That being said, in the dream, the green dragonflight works alongside the druids to control the ebb and flow of nature and protect it from a horrifying presence. A sickening corruption called the Emerald Nightmare constantly festers throughout the dream. This twisted dark magic alters life into a horrific mockery of itself and brings only madness and corruption. The origin of this dark power comes from the old gods and Xavius, the Nightmare Lord, who orchestrates the spreading of corruption across the dream. All of the hostile green dragons we see in-game from classic WoW to modern day have pretty much all been corrupted by the Nightmare. And even the aspect Ysera was cursed by the Nightmare, and in Legion, she was put down by the player characters.
Yeah.
The Green Dragon aspect would return in the Shadowlands expansion in the Zone of Ardenweald, which is like the Emerald Dream, but for dead creatures. And she helps Tron to fight Sylvanas and stuff.
Skeletor.
I will teach you ignorant children just how little you know of magic.
The Blue Dragonflight, led by Malygos, is an enclave of dragons committed to protecting the use of magic on Azeroth and making sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Malygos and his Blue Dragonflight went dormant for thousands and thousands of years after a major defeat I'll talk about later in this video during the War of the Ancients. And the dragon aspect was weakened, depressed, and a little bit insane. But then again, who isn't? Malygos would fully regain his power and sanity during the events told in the comic book series Shadowwing, a collection of books with, just some wonderful artwork, huh? In this series, Terragosa, one of the members of the Blue Dragonflight, brings some nether drakes to the Blue Dragonflight domain called the Nexus in hopes of balancing the magical energies inside of them. Instead, these nether dragons try and take over the Nexus, and then Malygos eats all of them, which then restores his sanity and his power. After spending 10,000 years dormant, Malygos realized that he really wasn't doing a good job of protecting the magic across Azeroth. The puny mortals on the planet had been abusing the power he was supposed to protect and had summoned the Burning Legion on Azeroth multiple times and fractured the world in the process. Malygos acted swiftly and started to divert all of the magic across Azeroth's ley lines and suck them up into the Nexus. This violent siphoning of magic had dramatic effects on Azeroth's world soul and caused irreparable damage. Furthermore, the mages of Dalaran noticed that their spells did not have the power they once had. You see, this was Malygos's biggest mistake, getting between a mage and their magic. The Kirin Tor mages said, "Fuck you, you goddamn scaly son of a bitch," and teleported their entire city from Hillsbrad foothills and into the air above Crystal Song Forest in Northrend. These mages then put their war against the Lich King on hold and teamed up with the red, bronze, and green dragonflights and the Horde and the Alliance and started the Nexus War. While Malygos may have had some valid criticisms about the mortals on Azeroth, destroying the world while trying to keep the magic away from them was no way to solve the problem, and he was defeated within his domain called the Eye of Eternity.
Unthinkable! The mortals will destroy everything!
Probably.
My sister, what have you...
I did what I had to, brother. You gave me no alternative. And so ends the Nexus War. This resolution pains me deeply, but the destruction, the monumental loss of life had to end. Regardless of Malagos's recent transgressions, I will mourn his loss.
I won't. You have the same dragon mount I got. Cool! The Blue Dragonflight then had another aspect leader called Caligos for a brief moment in time, but now in the modern day, the Blue Dragonflight's numbers have dwindled to such a low amount that the flight was abandoned altogether. The surviving dragons went their separate ways and are no longer unified by a single cause.
Time is a tangled web. Try not to dwell on all the loose ends.
Nosdormu, the Lord of Time, and the Bronze Dragonflight have the ability to travel through time to the past, present, and future. Their ultimate mission is to
Anyone can travel
maintain
to the
the
present.
true timeline on Azeroth. Whatever that means. Generally, the Bronze Dragonflight does not involve themselves in events on Azeroth unless they are absolutely needed. Some examples include when Nosdormu blessed Nordrassil to give the Kaldari Elves eternal life, or when the Bronze Dragonflight played a role in the War of the Shifting Sands.
Cool.
But the Bronze Dragonflight's real enemy is the Infinite Dragonflight. This is a flight of dragons corrupted by the old gods and are trying to manipulate the very fabric of time and space for their dark masters to be victorious. There's also an infinite dragon pirate called Time Cat and Hooktail. This was added in Shadowlands, and I will not elaborate further. The leader of the Infinite Dragonflight is a dragon named Muruzond, who is actually Nosdormu from the future. You see, since Nosdormu can see everything past, present, and future, he can also see his own death. Muruzond is a future version of himself who is trying to subvert his own death by destroying the true timeline and helping the old gods in the process. You can see the Infinite Dragonflight try and disrupt the timeline firsthand in the Caverns of Time dungeons, like Escape from Durnhold, the Black Morass, and the Culling of Strathhome. We finally defeat Muruzond in the End Time dungeon, which is a future version of Azeroth that will exist if the old gods win. This is also a good time to mention that Nosdormu and Muruzond are both voiced by Martin Sheen, who is a famous actor from these films, and he also has the most over-the-top, hilarious line delivery ever from Muruzond.
The powers of the hourglass do nothing to me.
The powers of the hourglass do nothing to me! With help from the player characters, Muruzond is defeated.
You know not what you have done. Fool, what I have seen. At last it has come to pass. The moment of my demise. The loop is closed. My future self will cause no more harm. Still, in time, I will fall to madness.
This guy's like knowing that.
You heroes will vanquish me. The cycle will repeat. So it goes.
Also, in this future,
don't wanna know the future.
catastrophic end-time version of Azeroth, there's a dragon impaled on the Wimrus Temple. And yeah, maybe we should talk about that guy, huh? Let's jump all the way back to when the dragons first got their powers. You know, while the other aspects got to enjoy being the protectors of life, taking naps in the Emerald Dream, controlling the flows of powerful magic, and traveling through time and space, you know what Neltharion, Guardian of the Earth, had to do? Sit in a cave, bored as hell. Furthermore, having the powers of an aspect was a gift, but also a burden. The force of Azeroth's Earth constantly weighed down on Neltharion. He could feel every single stone press upon his body, and the insurmountable pressure became overwhelming. This weight was his burden to bear alone, and ultimately, he found it to be too much.
Whisper, the earth war against my will.
Earthwarders seeked relief from this immense suffering, and that is when the whispers of the old gods, imprisoned deep within the earth, invaded his very soul. It was the old gods that could free Neltharion from this burden, and not only that, he could also be granted powers beyond his imagination if he served them. He could create a world where only his black dragonflight dominated Azeroth.
Your betrayal will be glorious.
His song.
Neltharion's schemes would not come to fruition until the events of the War of the Ancients, when the Burning Legion first invaded Azeroth. With an ancient artifact called the Dragon Soul, Neltharion convinced the other dragons to funnel a portion of their power into the disc so that it could be used as a powerful weapon against the demons that invaded Azeroth.
Strike down your allies and begin your true ascension.
But when it was time to actually use the disc against the demons, Neltharion said, he used the Dragon Soul to blast demons, night elves, and dragons alike. The blue dragonflight surrounded the crazed Earthwarder. Malygos tried to reason with him, but it was futile. One of the blue dragons struck by the Dragon Soul was named Sindragosa, who was hit so hard by the blast, she flew halfway across the world and landed in Northrend, where she would later be resurrected by the Lich King. And she's on the Wrath of the Lich King login screen, and she's all like, all of the dragonflights left to ruin, Neltharion retreated to his lair as his body began to crack from the overwhelming sheer power he now possessed. Magma and fire flowed from his chest, and his eyes burned with flaming red. His goblin and Drogbar slaves crafted him adamantium steel plates and bolted them to his body to stop him from splitting apart from the raw power he now possessed.
I am Deathwing, the destroyer, the end of all things. Inevitable, indomitable. I am the Cataclysm.
He's got some rage issues.
Yep.
Okay, so for the rest of Deathwing's lore, I'm only going to be focusing on the essentials of his story, because it's a lot. Okay, so after Deathwing's transformation, the Dragon Soul was renamed into the Demon Soul, and Malfurion teleported into his lair and he stole it. Then Illidan and Ajara's army stole it from Malfurion, and they tried to use it to open up a portal for the Burning Legion within the depths of the Well of Eternity. But then the spell was disrupted and reversed, and the portal started to suck up all of the demons out of Azeroth, and the Sundering began, aka the world being split apart. As this is happening, the Demon Soul is falling into the Well of Eternity, but then suddenly Nozdormu from the future appears and grabs the Demon Soul, and he turns to the camera, and he gives a cheeky wink, and then he teleports out of existence. After the Sundering is over and the world is split, future Nozdormu pops back into existence again, and gives the 4 other aspects the Demon Soul, and they put a spell on it to prevent Deathwing from using it, and then they hide it deep within the earth under Red Ridge. Meanwhile, after the Sundering, Deathwing returns to his lair to find out his slaves have started an uprising, sparked by a Tauren named Hold High Mountain, so he leaves and takes a long nap inside of Deepholm. Thousands of years pass and the Dark Portal is opened and the orcs are pouring into Azeroth and the First War begins. Deathwing awakes from his slumber and disguises himself as a human noble and a Blackrock orc, and spies on both sides of the war and kinda just hangs out. The orcs win the First War, and during the Second War, Deathwing finds the Demon Soul. Turns out trying to hide it from Deathwing, the aspect of the Earth, by putting it in the Earth is not a good idea. Problem is, Deathwing himself cannot control it because of the ward the aspects placed on the artifact. So Deathwing grants magic convenient visions to Zolthred the Whacked, chieftain of the Dragonmaw Orc clan, and leads him to the Demon Soul. These orcs then kill the red dragons protecting the artifact and claim it as their own, and the orcish warlock Necro Skullcrusher wields it.
You've got mail.
Deathwing sends Necros more magically convenient email dream visions on how to use the Demon Soul, and the orcs use it to enslave Alexstrasza and her red dragonflight.
No.
They imprison the Dragon Queen within the abandoned dwarven city called Grimpatol. The Dragonmaw clan then use the red dragons as mounts to fight against the Alliance and force Alexstrasza to make more eggs in her imprisonment. Despite this, the Horde still loses the war and the majority of the orcs fled back into the Dark Portal and Deathwing follows them. He strikes a deal with the orcs and offers them some Black Dragon children in exchange for safe passage into Draenor. They agree and Deathwing flies to Gorgron and has a secret lair with a bunch of Black Dragon eggs. The Gron and the ogres living there did not like their territory being invaded, especially their leader named Gruul. Gruul teams up with Khadgar, Turalyon, and Illyria, who are also on Draenor, and they fight Deathwing, and Gruul impales a bunch of black dragons on spikes around the zones, granting him the title, the Dragon Killer. Deathwing said, "Fuck this shit, I'm out." To Azeroth, where he got into another fight with mages from Dalaran, and faked his own death by falling into the sea. Meanwhile, back on Draenor, Ner'zhul opened up a bunch of portals which led to the world being destroyed and turning into the Outlands. The remaining black dragons on Outland were twisted by the magic and turned into nether drakes. Deathwing then infiltrated the Alliance again as a noble named Lord Daval Prestor, but he was pretty sussy to the other nobles and the Kirin Tor mages, and he didn't end up doing much. The three remaining aspects, Malygos, Ysera, and Nozdormu, help free Alexstrasza from Grim Patol, and with the help from a human mage named Ronan, he destroys the Demon Soul, which grants all the other aspects full power once again, and Deathwing fled deep home into hiding again. Classic WoW comes out, and Deathwing's children Onyxia and Nefarian are causing trouble in Azeroth. Onyxia disguises herself as Katrina Prestor, and no one bats an eye that she has the same last name as that sussy guy that tried to infiltrate the Alliance beforehand. Nefarian has a lair in Blackrock Mountain, where he's working on experiments to make a dragonflight that can really taste the rainbow, and he's combining all of the dragons together to make the chromatic dragonflight. But both of them are defeated. Random side tangent here. One of Nefarian's creations was a 5-headed dragon called Chromatus. Now, Nefarian died before he could give this abomination life, but later the Twilight cultists empowered it in the book Twilight of the Aspects. Now, Chromatus only makes an appearance in this book and almost single-handedly kills the other aspects and is literally indestructible. Despite this, Chromatus is defeated, but he doesn't die, so he was thrown inside of an arcane prison. So perhaps, maybe in the future, we will actually see him in-game. Side tangent over. Onyxia and Nefarian's mother and Deathwing's baby mama is a black dragon named Sinistharia, also known as Sinestra, who hates Deathwing and wants to make her own dragonflight. She goes to Outlands, steals some nether dragon eggs, and flies to Grim Patol, and uses the shards from the Demon Soul that I guess were just left on the ground to create the Twilight Dragonflight. But actually, Deathwing planted this idea to make the Twilight Dragonflight in her mind because writing. She is killed by her own experimental children and is later resurrected by Deathwing, and oh my god, this plotline sucks. Thousands of nerds stand outside of game stores midnight December 7th, 2010, and the Cataclysm expansion drops.
For World of Warcraft Cataclysm, let me hear it! Cataclysm! Cataclysm!
Meaning Deathwing has awoken once again. He erupts out of the earth, which tears a rift between Azeroth and the elemental planes, causing natural disasters all around the world. The Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor are revamped, yada yada yada, and Deathwing gets punched in the face by Dwarf. Later in Twilight Highlands, Deathwing gets in an epic fight with Alexstrasza, but it's also an in-game cinematic from over a decade ago with no sound effects whatsoever. So you get this awesome scene, oh wow, where they're rolling down the hill. Oh, wow, that's so epic. Alexstrasza loses the battle, but Deathwing is wounded and flies away. Later in the expansion, the aspects regroup. Kaligos is now the blue dragonflight aspect, and Thrall is in place of the earthen aspect. They decide that if they are ever going to defeat Deathwing, they are going to need to obtain the Dragon Soul in its purest form. Before they do that, they go to the future to deal with Murozond, like I mentioned earlier in the video. In this hypothetical future, Deathwing became so powerful, his body started ripping apart at the seams, and since the world was fully dominated by the old gods, he was no longer useful to them. So they mind-controlled him and forced him to impale himself on top of the Wyrmrest Temple, which... God damn, that is badass.
Yeah.
Okay, now with Murozond killed, now we can travel back in time to the War of the Ancients, grab the Demon/Dragon Soul, and then travel back to the present time and start the Dragon Soul raid, the last raid in the Cataclysm expansion. Okay, so the actual Dragon Soul raid gets ragged on a lot by the player base by being pretty meh gameplay-wise, but there is absolutely no denying that Deathwing's death at the end of this raid is the coolest death of any villain ever in the Warcraft universe. So the Dragon Soul is empowered by the aspects, and then Thrall shoots a giant laser beam at Deathwing. And then you get to go on an airship and parachute onto Deathwing's back, and then you rip apart the plates holding him together. And then Thrall shoots another laser beam at him, which makes a giant hole in his chest, and he falls into the Maelstrom, a swirling vortex where he originally birthed from, and the same place where he first betrayed his friends. And as this giant dragon is clinging on for dear life, fire and magma spewing all over his broken body, you slowly help push him down, and then finally Deathwing is defeated by Thrall shooting another giant fucking laser beam! With Deathwing defeated, the Aspects had fulfilled their purpose of defending Azeroth, and the powers granted to them by the Titans was fully expended. After the Cataclysm, it was now the Age of Mortals. It was up to the people of Azeroth to defend the planet from future threats. But this does not mean that the Aspects are powerless, but they are mortal now, and are not nearly as powerful as they once were. Even after the Cataclysm expansion, we still see them involved in Azeroth's conflicts, like when they empowered the Heart of Azeroth in Battle for Azeroth. As for the Black Dragonflight, there is an extremely small amount left on Azeroth still alive, and there's an even smaller amount that isn't corrupted by the old gods. Wrathion the Black Prince is one of these black dragons who is trying to restore his flight's name.
Anduin, it's been so long.
Punch.
And that is really everything you need to know about dragons in Warcraft. Of course, there are some smaller details I brushed over, but maybe we can talk about those in another video. And no, wait, we are not done. You know these dragon spawn guys? You want to know the lore behind them? None. Literally none. This is all that's on their Wowpedia page. And they became this way from hanging out with dragons. And what the hell does that even mean? You also got the Draconid, who are half man, half dragons, who are empowered by the flights they serve, but also they became this way just from hanging out with dragons. Again, what does that even mean? You got dragon men. These are humans meshed with dragon spawn. Stone drakes. These are actually elementals and not dragons. Storm dragons. These are storm dragons. I don't need to explain them. And you have storm drakes. These are another type of dragon that lives in Stormheim that just also exist and barely relate to anything I've talked about for the last 30 minutes. Okay, that's everything you need to know about dragons.
All right, so definitely feel better prepared for Dragonflight when we start checking out those cinematics. I think some more cinematics have already come out. Some people have been sharing links with us in our Discord, so looking forward to eventually, you know, starting that journey and continue our Warcraft journey, but starting Dragonflight journey.
Yeah, there is a lot with dragons, which is great, and I very much appreciate this compilation that we just saw. He was obviously very knowledgeable. He injected some humor, but I also appreciated the enthusiasm of this fan, because you could tell he was very passionate about it. And when we get to the end, he's like, because they hang out with dragons. Like, what does that even mean? And I'm sitting here going like, yeah, like, can I turn into something cool if I hang out with dragons? Like, is that all it's required?
Yeah, if you can find a dragon and you hang out with it, then you definitely become something amazing. He's
implying I'm not already amazing. Did you catch that? Oh, put you on the spot.
That is not what I was saying. I got nothing. Gotta choose my words more carefully.
I think I just made you speechless for one of the few times ever.
Yeah, this is true. I was trying to think of a witty retort and I had nothing. You bested me.
Doesn't happen very often, so I gotta savor the moment.
So which of the aspects, which dragon was your favorite?
The storyline of the Red Dragons.
Alexstrasza.
Alexstrasza I really liked. I liked her character, but also just what the Red Dragons went through, because, you know, she's a dragon queen, but the path of the Red Dragons was not easy. And at one point they are basically enslaved by trolls and by Darkwing and Deathwing, sorry. And so I just felt, but then there's like that they come out the other side of it and they do redeem themselves. And so I kind of like that. I like a good redemption story. I like that their path isn't easy. It's not all like, you know, rainbows and butterflies, which isn't to say that the other dragon races were per se. Yeah. But this one just seemed to have like an especially good struggle story. Yeah,
Alexstrasza is the coolest one, I think, for sure, the red dragons. And then Ysera. I enjoyed that. Like, you know, living in a cool world that's beautiful and untouched by other living creatures. So
Being paired up with the druids, that sounds pretty cool.
yeah. So we learned a little bit about this in some Dragonflight cinematics we watched beforehand. So it was nice getting like a little bit of a refresher course. And it was nice getting more into Cataclysm and Deathwing itself, because Deathwing was a character that I really enjoyed, and it's just a cool name for a dragon. Like, so
It's a great villain.
Yeah, so fitting. So we're gonna check out more World of Warcraft, and if you want all of our World of Warcraft reactions, go ahead and check out the description of this video. We got a playlist there for you. Let us know what you thought about this video, and more suggestions to check out for World of Warcraft. Obviously, we're gonna continue with Dragonflight and check out that, like we said earlier. Thanks so much for checking out our reaction for everything you need to know about dragons in Warcraft, but just keep in mind
That our reaction is definitely not definitive.